Yo guys, what up, Viper here, and today we are back with the new big changes to the Arena Ascendant game mode. Now we have Ascension coins, and we're just like, I don't know, it's like a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to take in. I assume all of you guys have checked out the announcement, probably have checked out some other videos, so I don't want to bore you with all the like mechanics in place. If you want me to bore you about all of those things, or I mean, I guess explain everything, let me know and I can make a dedicated video on all the new mechanics and changes. Otherwise, I'm just gonna dive into some new teams, and this is gonna be the most fun team that I've played so far, the most enjoyable one to me, because it focuses pretty much around my favorite Illuvium to a good extent. So let's just jump into it. Okay. This looks crazy, right? There's 50 slots in the deck now, in the team now. I don't know why I keep messing that up, but it's fine. At some point, we're gonna get used to it. Okay. Why is it 50? Why is it so much? Why is it looking a bit confusing? It actually isn't once you get to play some games, because about half to 2/3 of your teams are usually still like around some main strategy, main idea, and then you have a lot of like late game variation and supportive options. That's how this team is built. The other option is that you have like 2 to 3 fundamentally different things, and you try to figure out in the earlier stages of the game, what is my opponent committing towards, what is my opponent going for, and then you decide what to counter their strategy with. Here I have mainly 2 different options that you can go from the beginning of the game. One is a like Scoriox Arcanite focused option that also utilizes Behemoths, and the other one is a just verdant Behemoth focused one, which is, I don't know, if your opponent plays like a very air oriented team and like revenant oriented team and so on, the verdant one is pretty good. But if they play Ramfire, then you probably do want to go for the Scoriox version, just because having more damage is really good for this Ramfire, because your goal is to kill Ramfire. If you don't kill the Ramfire, then the Ramfire will eventually kill you. So that's the main idea here. Now, I really like Scoriox. It's one of my favorite Illuviums, has always been. I've been kind of sad that it's been not really meta ever since, I don't know, almost like the earlier stages of the beta testing that we are in right now. And then Fireox was pretty much the primary one. Now, one of the super good changes that I think we have had, like the fundamental system changes in how the Ascension Arena mode works, right, is that the fire dominant affinity of a Scoriox is also buffing Scoriox, right? It used to be Fireox is a fire Illuvium, Scoriox is a magma Illuvium. So Scoriox gets a magma buff and Fireox gets a fire buff. Now Scoriox gets magma plus fire, which is really amazing because Scoriox has better base stats than Fireox, and now it also gets the fire buff, which is a very damage oriented buff, while magma, I don't know, it's like cool that it has that and it makes sense and so on, but it's really hard to utilize Magma versus Ramfires, because Magma, you want Scoriox to be close to the enemies, or like a tank, a small tank in front, and then Scoriox behind. Magma slowly creeps up on them. But yeah, with Ramfire you can't really do that, or even with Vermilion and like all this AoE damage stuff in the meta, you want the Scoriox to be as far away from those things, so Magma not really useful, and that's kind of been the theme of the game. But now just like the base stat increase and Scoriox still having fire makes that still very powerful. Also, hyper overall, like, okay, I'm kind of diving into these changes a bit, but I want to elaborate what has changed and why I think this is good now, right? So, Scoriox being a Psion dominant and the Psion hyper being changed to giving you gradually up to 100 Omega power buff while the hyper bar loads up, and then another flat 100 buff once it's loaded up, translating that to Scoriox ability and the Arcanite trait. That basically means Scoriox gets like 170 attack damage bonus while the ability is active. Because Arcanite gives you 5% or 2 Arcanite, 35% of your mega power, aka 70 damage, and a Scoriox ability gives you 55, aka 110. Sorry, it's 180 added up. It's not even only 170. So yeah, it's like 180 attack damage bonus while Scoriox is doing the big AoE auto attacks. That is pretty crazy. That's why you can take down things like Ramfires and so on, because if Scoriox is just far away from the Ramfire, Scoriox can just shoot at them. If the enemy team is full rogue, full melees clumping up, Scoriox can AoE everything down, especially in combination with Seer. And then, well, the traits just line up really well nowadays. You can basically form a really good 3 air, 3 fire, 3 earth, 3 bulwark, 3 Psion, 3 fighter team, with going for Seer, Johto, and Scoriox, and then just using a bunch of supportive trait oriented Illuviums, right? Meaning For example, Tatopy and Scarabog. Tatopy and Scarabog are gonna be very powerful in a lot of teams at the moment because Ascension coin mechanic, right? You only get 2 coins per turn, so you can only make a Titan or a Null in one turn. You cannot make 2 Colossus in one turn. But you can make Scarabog into Goliath and Tatopy into TNT in one single turn, aka you have 2 Granite Illuviates, which is adding a lot of frontline to your team. That's like one of the best frontline things you can do with 2 Ascension coins, one of the best upgrades that you can do after you've upgraded your carries. And it just aligns really, really well, again, with a Scoriox, a Seer, and Jotun, because you can just play a Psion Ranger, a Psion Fire Ranger, and then you have the Tatopy plus a Scoriox plus the Ranger be just the 3 Psion Illuviates. Very, very easy. And then Scarabog, one of the Prime Earth Bulwark Illuviates, plus Seer, still keeping that Bulwark trait. Just fits really, really well. And then with Jotun plus a couple Dokas and Grokos, you just like make this 3 Affinity, a 3 class thing just perfectly work. Because it's 8 Illuviates plus 1 Ranger, so you have 9 base things, 9 base affinities and classes. And you can, until like super, super late game when you want to add like more stage 3 Illuvies and so on, it's very, very easy to get these setups with like 3 Fire, 3 Earth, 3 Air, or like you can change those out, and then the class setups with 3 Bulwark, 3 Fighter, 3 Psion, or again, similar things. A lot of empaths are used as well for that strategy, right? So that's kind of the overall change. That's kind of why I think this lines up really, really well, because you have really easy upgrades going from like the Flare, Mule, and Fyrox lines and so on, to just having this Arcanite and Behemoth setup, having a lot of really good supportive traits, Fire, Earth, Air really aligning well together, not really anything that is countering you based on Hyper. Just very, very strong. Because if the enemy team wants to go for water, beating your earth and fire, then Jotun is gonna go hyper, and fighter hyper is crazy strong. So the air Jotun fighter is just gonna demolish the entire enemy team if they try to overcommit to a lot of water Illuviates trying to beat your earth and fire setup. Or you can also just deviate and be like, okay, I'm just not gonna play some extra earth Illuvian. Maybe I'm missing out in the earth trade, but I can counter my opponent's hyper, and my opponent probably playing some suboptimal units. So that checking out, right? Then why are there like so many Flishes and Dokas and so on? That is basically for in the later stages of the game. Generally speaking, right now, you preferably bond your Ranger to a 25 cost Illuvia, like a stage 1 Illuvia, because you can just like easily sell and play something else. Therefore, later on, you can adjust your Ranger's weapon based on what you need to counter the enemy team on hyper. That's why there are so many different swords in this team. You can basically use the Earth Sword with Scoriox or with Seer for either Arcanite and Magma, or for Behemoth and Magma. And then you can use the Fire Sword and the Earth Bulwark for, again, Fire Sword and Earth Bulwark, or Fire Sword and Earth Psion, aka Tatopy. You can do either Arcanite or you can do Behemoth as well. And then, okay, the Water Sword is kind of just, there's nothing to bond with, but if water is just countering the enemy team, you prefer to have the Water Sword over +1 Magma, to be honest. That's why the Water Sword is in there. The same could be said about the Nature Sword, but Nature Sword is a bit for if you want to play Jotun and Twine and so on. Okay, without further ado though, I think I've just said a lot of the overall things. How do you approach this game? Let's just look into the Scoriox, Arcanite line at first, and then just, I don't know, like maybe say a few more words to the different options and like the Twine, Verdant, Jotun thing and so on. So basically, I don't know if it's a feature or a bug, I really don't know yet. I think it could be a cool feature, but it could also be an annoying one, I have to play and test more, is that if you use an Ascension coin on an Illuvial, you can, after that, move the Illuvial for free. I don't think it's gonna be like that in the future, but currently it is. What does this mean? You can just commit Flare and Fiery on turn 1, plus a 10 cost fire weapon. You have a triple fire setup, it's a lot of damage, a lot of AoE damage especially. Flare and Fiery all AoE, right? Once you upgrade them, you can move them. Therefore, you don't actually commit any positioning on turn 1, even though you play a 100 mastery point board that is relatively strong. It's probably not gonna win every turn 1, but you're gonna mitigate some damage, and again, the following turn you upgrade to Cinch, you upgrade to Fyrox, you can freely move them around again and adjust your positioning. It's very, very powerful. So turn 1, Flare, Fiery, Weapon, easy. Turn 2, you upgrade both of those to Cinch and Fyrox, you use your Ascension coins, and then you go for Tatopy and you go for the Earth Doka, pretty much just filling out the 3 Psion with the Tatopy, and with the Earth Doka you have something to bond your Ranger weapon to, so you can get the Arcanite and Magma Ranger, and then your Singe has Magma, your Ranger has Magma, your Ranger and Fyrox have Arcanite. Very good turn 2 setup, again a very high damage setup. And then on turn 3 you can either go for a air fighter oriented route, or you can just fill out the bulwarks and so on, but basically that is a bit variable. What you always want to do on turn 3 is you want to use 1 Ascension coin at least, because Ascension coins only 1 carry over to the next turn, so if you have 2 unused, only 1 will carry over. Therefore you really want to use at least 1 every turn, so the next turn you then have 3, and then you want to use at least 2, or maybe 3 even, right? So that you only have 1 left over every turn. That is very, very important. Mastery points become relatively abundant the longer the game goes, because we just don't have a bunch of augments to spend them on anymore, and therefore the Ascension coins are the late game relevant resource, and you never want to just waste 1. You always want to use as many as possible per turn, so that at least the one that you don't use can carry over to the next turn, then you can use it next turn. Again, going back to the turn 3 option, right? So we have essentially we have triple fire, we have triple Psion, and we have 1 fighter and 1 bulwark. Now you can decide to go for something like Mjöl, Air Doka, Air Grokko, which puts you at the triple fighter and triple air input, which, I don't know, maybe good versus water teams, for example, right? Versus water, Earth is very weak, so putting the triple Earth on turn 3 already can be a bit rough, because you don't have all the air Illuviates in yet to counter the Earth getting hyper versus the water getting hyper versus your Earth, for example. So against Earth teams you want to prioritize getting air in, and versus, for example, fire teams you would want to prioritize getting the Earth Illuviates in. Now, what Illuviates do you want to get in? It's always going to be Mjöl, Air Doka, and Air Grokko, and depending on how some mastery points line up, because maybe you want to move in Illuvium, maybe you want to do something else, you can go for Earth Grokko or for Scarabok, both Earth bulwarks. At some point in the game, you always want to swap the Earth Grokko out for Scarabok, and you want to ascend Scarabok to Goliath, but yeah, like you can just, like, if you have 25 points left, you might as well play the Earth Grokko for a power spike that turn. If you have more than 25 left, you have like 50 left, you can play the Scarabok. Basically, like easy like that. If your opponent has some really good positioning and you have to adjust positioning, instead of going for Scarabok, adjust positioning, go for Grokko. That is one of the things. And you also want to use 1 Ascension coin on turn 3. Like I said, I would say preferably on Scoriox. That's like the easiest one to use it on. You can also adjust positioning on Scoriox again. That is quite strong. And then the following turn, on turn 4, it is very important that you want to go for Jotun and you want to go for Seer, just getting the Behemoths in. And that is just a really, really big power spike, especially because, again, you can move that Singe that became a Seer for 3 this turn. So you can adjust the positioning of your Seer, of your Jotun. And yeah, just adjusting the Behemoths according to what your opponent currently has, very, very powerful. And then on turn 5 and 6, you kind of have this option. Either you can go towards, okay, I'm going to power spike, I'm going to put in Granite, because Scarabok to Goliath and Tatopy to TNT's 2 Ascension coins, you get 2 per turn, easy play. Or the other option is you slowly try to go for a Mystic setup, which probably is really strong late game, but the issue is Mystic setups need 3 Ascension coins to just be a thing, right? Because you need to put Adorius and Apon at stage 3 and at stage 2, compared to Goliath and TNT, which are both only stage 2. So then you have to kind of make the trade-off and figure that out depending on the game as well. Then again, things like, for example, putting in a Phosphorus, just dropping your triple Earth, triple Fire, triple Air setup, depending, I mean, you can adjust what you want to drop, because you can adjust with Dokas, Grokkos, and Flish exactly what you want to play. You can choose, okay, Bulwark is really good here, therefore I drop, I don't know, Fighter. Or Psion is really good here, right? Or, I don't know, you just figure that out in the game. There's no rule that I can give you. I know it's always the nice content creator thing to just give you this exact plan of what to do every single turn, but that plan doesn't exist. There's always, this is very situational, right? It's the same thing, somebody makes an item tier list in TFT. It's complete like noob bait, because almost every item in TFT has a niche use case where it is the best thing to make. Or if you're in a situation where it's like, well, this is the only thing that you can make, well, obviously you have to make it. It doesn't matter if it's the worst item in the game in theory. And it's kind of the same thing here, right? Where everything is just very dependent on what your opponent is doing and going for. So yeah, it's just like this super noob thing to just do the same thing every game. Therefore, I really try to teach to not do that and just think a bit what you want to do in this situation. For example, Phosphorus, fighter nature, enemy team is very air heavy. Nature, very, very good. You probably want to put in the Phosphorus, right? Fighter hyper is super strong. Phosphorus is still a 100 cost stage 5. Tier 5, stage 3 Alluvial. So it's obviously going to count an air team, right? It's obviously going to be very good versus that. And if you lose air or if you lose earth or whatever in the meantime, it is what it is. You get this super hyper carry strong Alluvial for it. So I think that is really, really relevant to note there. And we can jump into some gameplay to just look how it works, how you position what you do. If you want to play the Verdant, Jotun line and so on, it's like not that difficult to go for that. Basically, you just you play like you did before, right? You play like you did before. The only difficult thing is you have to choose if you want to prioritize Arcalion or if you want to prioritize going for Mystics first. That is the only difference to how you played Verdant Behemoth before, and now you cannot play Twine on turn 1 anymore. Okay, fine. You play like Jotun on turn 2, you upgrade to Twine on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you could just go for Mystic, or you can go for Arcalion and then you go Mystic on turn 5. It's exact same thing as before. I made a video on that. You can check out the Verdant Behemoth one and then you just change up the turns of the Ascension coins a bit. So let's jump into some gameplay for the Scoriox team. Okay, here we have essentially I guess one of the first few days, a super standard thing. Everybody was just like defaulting to let's play Revenant and Ramfire again like we always did for the past month. I don't know, it's a bit boring, but I guess it is what it is. So yeah, we're playing versus the Revenant Ramfire thing, and I don't know, I really don't like adding the upgraded Volantis and things like that, and upgraded T-pos. Like, I think that's really not good. But this is like not a finished list, right? And yeah, like certainly you just want to play, you can kind of think of team building now in terms of, okay, how many turns can I utilize my Ascension coins, right? And the turns where you use Ascension coins on Volantis, they don't happen, right? That you kind of just use 2 Ascension coins on 5 or 6 other Alluvials before, then you're already on turn 7 or something like that. There's gonna be a better play than upgrading a Volante by 2 things on turn 8. Right, so I don't think that this is a great choice of the Volantes and so on. I would just rather play some different team option, right? Just some entirely different option. And yeah, for example, like you could play Magma Enchanter, right? There's already the Kuka, Kakulus, and Kakaref in here. You could just put some like Magma Enchanter setup in here, and that would be probably better versus some teams that some people might be going for. But nonetheless, we're playing versus Revenant Ramfire here, one of my recent games when I was streaming. Now, this augment thing here, I think fundamentally the idea is very, very good, but it's super not balanced at the moment, right? The goal of this is not for it to be balanced, so I don't really have an issue with that, but I think it's really, really worth noting that oftentimes when you win or lose games, just check out what augments did you have and what augments did the opponent have. For example, if you play this team here and the Ramfire player gets Indomitable on Ramfire, that is really, really hard to deal with because you cannot prevent the Ramfire from casting and you're essentially still playing a Behemoth focused team most of the time. So if the Ramfire casts with 150% bonus damage, there's no counterplay for you, right? It's just like, well, it's bad luck. They got the augment. You have to outposition them like crazy and outplay them like crazy because they got the Giga OP Exodia augment for this matchup, right? What augments do you want to go for? I think that's worth mentioning. So either you want to have things that just buff a Scoriox damage or attack speed, that's really, really good. Or you want to have defensive augments on your Singe and Seer. Those are your 2 first priorities. Defensive augments for Flare, Singe, Seer essentially, because that is your main tank. It's a Magma Bulwark. It's very, very tanky, a lot of damage mitigation there. Having something that's like health regeneration. There's one augment, or I think there's multiples that say like 2% health regeneration plus some resistances, things like that. Very, very good to give the Seer because it also often goes hyper and the Bulwark hyper, high damage reduction and so on. This very, very good combo. And then on the Scoriox side, something like Omnivamp, especially if you play versus things like Ramfire, just to counter the, I don't know, just like a random AoE damage, Gyros, Revenant, Inferno stuff, right? Like all this AoE damage, just counter that a bit with some Omnivamp on Scoriox or just some more damage on Scoriox. That's the main things to look out for. So looking at these augments here, for example, nothing is really good for me. Like the on being hit by an attack gain Thorns thing, that augment sounds really cool, but unless you have some hyper tank, it's really not that good. Immune doesn't help my team, and Photon Ripper is kind of whatever as well. So yeah, you see, I chose the immune one on the flare here, because then the enemy Volante's silence is not gonna cancel the spin, which is honestly pretty okay. That is very fine. If your spin doesn't get cancelled, that's very, very strong. You can see here, it was immune, the Volantes didn't cancel the spin, so we just got some more damage off the flare, which means that Fiery can just finish off both Volantes. It's gonna lose to the Rampy, but that's fine. You can just mitigate some damage here. You need some really, really strong turn 1 augments to win this turn, something like your entire team gets shields or tank stat bonus to flare and things like that. Here you can see Redemption Core, that's one of the good ones. Just the health region part is crazy, crazy strong. And then yeah, positioning wise, you can see I just entirely swap my Fyrox to the other side, and then I adjust my Singe to be essentially same side-ish as the Fyrox. And we go for the Doka here in the back, because if the enemy goes for a Ramfire setup here, for example, which a lot of people have been doing, I think they've learned that the Ramfire on turn 2 like isn't really the play after a while. But yeah, if they just go for the Ramfire setup, they usually go for a corner position on the Ranger, so the Doka in the corner can help sniping that. Outside of that, you want to have Tetopy like slightly in front of Fyrox, so if they play some melee Illuvius, Tetopy can tank them, not Fyrox / Scoriox later on. And you don't have to worry too much about min-max in this positioning, because you can change it on Scoriox. Ranger positioned for Magma, Singe positioned middle-ish. So yeah, just like Magma and all the AoE damage can be really, really powerful here. Enemy Ramfire didn't get great augments here, so that's really, really good for us. But yeah, turn 2 versus Revenant is difficult. Oh. It is difficult, but you can see that Fyrox is getting hyper versus the Air Illuvial, so it's just doing enough damage anyways. Yeah, betting phase here, Arcanite, really, really good thing to get. I think one of the reasons why Ramfire is really good and Ramfire seems very problematic in a lot of matchups at the moment is because Ramfire has the most Exodia-like augments and legendary augments, and in just the general augments that you get. Like there's a lot of stuff that really feels like Exodia, that really feels hard to deal with if Ramfire gets access to that. But yeah, then again, here you can see my opponent is going for the Revenant setup, so we prioritize Earth and Bulwark. If opponents will go for a Ramfire setup, you want to prioritize Air and Fighter, because you just want to kill the Ramfire really, really quickly, preferably before it can get an ability off. But with Revenant setup, you want to have tank stats, so that the enemy team can't just kill you, can't start getting those Revenant shields. Now, something like this Arcanite imprint, I mean, eventually you want to give it to Mjolnir, aka Jotun, but on turns here you can think, okay, who can I give it to? Just for the tempo, having this extra power buff this turn, and then later on I can just sell it and adjust, right? So Tetopy is a good choice for that. It's a ranged Illuvial, it does a good amount of damage, and yeah. Low tier Illuvials also have higher base attack speed, which works well with Arcanite's flat attack damage buff pretty much. And then we go for the Dokas here again, because I don't know, we eventually just want Dokas to run here, beat up the Ramfire, something like that, and then make having Dokas here on this backline thing good in these turns. Now you can see the Singe is getting the Bulwark Hyper, which is a really high damage reduction, and plus because we got the really good tank augment, it just isn't killed, right? It just survives versus this Revenant team setup. Revenant team setup doesn't have the craziest damage, and Bulwark Hyper just gives you so much damage reduction in combination with healing. Very, very strong. I like this augment a lot. On takedown, you get 10% attack speed buff, and you get some healing. I think that's like a totally fine augment to give Scoriox. Physical Pierce could be okay on Jotun and Singe / Seer. Very, very strong, but yeah, I think in hindsight, the Physical Pierce augment for Seer Jotun probably even better than going for the Synaptic Booster on Scoriox here, because I have this Arcanite emblem, so I have more damage anyways. Therefore, just overloading on more and more damage, and my opponent not having a defensive augment on Ramfire would be very good. Now, my opponent has Vampiric, which in theory is defensive, but it's not if it can never cast an ability, right? And that's the goal. You want to beat up the Ramfire before it can cast even one ability with the Behemoths. aka if Ramfire doesn't have become untargetable or indomitable or anything like that, you really can just beat it up with the fighters, and that's like your goal here. And if the Ramfire is just killed, then Scoriox can clean up whatever is left. Yeah, positioning wise, in this matchup, you usually want to be... This matchup is kind of easy in that sense, unless they have this Indomitable and the crazy Exodia Augment setups. You can kind of just have a Jotun behind your Scoriox, something to block Jotun from walking to the front, so it walks to the back, it just starts hitting these guys. Because there are not many big rogues, Ramfire tends to be in the front, and these small rogues tend to be in the back, so it's very likely that Jotun will attack the Ramfire. And yeah, that's essentially your goal, and you still want to prevent the enemy ranger. If the enemy goes, I mean, here's Revenant Ranger, right? If the enemy goes for a Phantom Ranger, you still want to have your Dokas or your just like some small units in the corners to beat up the enemy Phantom Ranger. And you can see here, okay, the enemy Ramfire is going to get hyper, and they eventually kill, it's not going to get hyper, but they get all these Revenant shields and so on. But because the enemy team is 4 air and no water, no nothing, the Seer just gets hyper again, super high damage reduction, just won't die, right? And at the same time, Jotun, Scoriox, Seer, they all do a lot of damage, and Revenant Inferno setup just doesn't do enough damage to kill all of them. And again, like, they're just weak on hyper, right? Also, especially problematic for my opponent, they put the Ador, which is a nature Illuvium, like super weak for hyper against me, right? On this side, aka my guys just got really easy hyper. And here you can see this swap to the Earth Sword, bond with the Fire Fish, so maintain a triple fire, triple Psion, triple fighter, triple bulwark, just maintain all the things, and that's why you put in the fish here, right? Now, why do I go for the Earth Sword here? Mainly because Earth Sword has a slightly more defenses than Fire Sword, and the enemy team doesn't have a Phantom Ramfire. Therefore, just having more defenses means the Ranger probably can just live a Ramfire cast, even if it does get to cast. And yeah, if your Ranger can live, Ranger, pretty sick damage dealer, very good. Now we can look at the fight here, right? Now it's the same side setup, which means I'm not getting the easy hyper because yeah, I'm just not getting the easy hyper anymore because there's a water and the nature guy is further away. But the Ramfire didn't have some Exodia crit augments, wasn't Phantom, right? Just nothing crazy, just Revenant setup not being enough damage. So that was a easy win. That's how the matchup is supposed to go, unless they get Undominable and or Ramfire can crit on Omega, so that they can play Revenant and Phantom Pseudo at the same time. And the same goes for legendary augments. If they get Revenant or Phantom, it's very problematic. There's a lot of augments that are like Exodia for this Revenant Ramfire team, because they give them utility that they're not supposed to be having. And that's kind of the story there. So Revenant Ramfire setup, it's only good because the augments currently help it. So guys, don't cope about balance and this and that and whatnot. It's literally just the augments that make the Revenant Ramfire setup good. Without Omega can crit, without Indomitable, without the legendary augment system the way it currently is, it would literally be a horrendously bad team. Like they literally just live off legendary augments at the moment, and legendary augments are far less useful for something like Scoriox. There's nothing equivalent to your Omega can crit for Scoriox. There's no like every auto attack gives you 10% attack speed bonus. The augment literally says 2% attack speed buff for every auto attack. To be on an equivalent power level would need to be 10%, like some crazy number. So we just either need more of these Exodia augments for more other, like on the balance side, right? But that's not the goal of the patch anyway, so I'm not going to dive too deep into that. I think that's probably a PB4 later update thing. But just to like explain, the main thing, what you probably want to look out for right now is either you just make overall powerful teams and then you hope your opponent doesn't hit the Exodia augments and you win, or you make teams that work around these Exodia-like augments, Exodia-like setups, and then you go for them. And then the next level idea is probably going to be in the future that we have a team that is fundamentally very powerful, and then we have a second option or maybe two other options that work really well with, if we get this augment, then we go for this, something like that. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments what you want to know next. I have a lot of ideas for teams. I think it's going to be kind of fun. I'll probably focus on making some team-oriented videos in the next 1 to 2 weeks, and then I'll probably do some evergreen-ish things in the setup of PB4, in the setup of testnet, and so on. Updated roadmap. Check out Discord, check out announcements, and see you guys in the next one.